There's no doubt that winning a UFC title is one of the hardest things to do in the whole of sports, and anyone who has done so has our respect in perpetuity. However, some reigns are a little less impressive than others for one reason or another. Today, we're discussing the 10 worst title reigns in the history of the UFC, so stay with us. At 10, we're talking BJ Penn. BJ is a legit legend, and as a member of the UFC's Hall of Fame, his UFC career is in no way being questioned. What is up for debate, however, is his welterweight reign back in 2004. BJ moved up in weight to challenge Matt Hughes for the welterweight crown, securing his first UFC title in the process after submitting the champion. However, the fight was actually the last of his deal, and as such, he was free to negotiate with other promotions, which he did, promptly leaving the UFC for K1. Dana and the UFC were not happy at BJ's antics, but they were powerless to stop him from leaving. The situation regarding Penn leaving as champion was instrumental in creating the Champions Clause, which now means champions cannot leave the promotion, even if their contract has expired, a clause that still doesn't sit well with a lot of fighters. Conor is coming through at 9. Another two-division champion, Conor McGregor, became UFC lightweight champion in November 2016 after telling anyone who would listen his dream was to become a double champion. He achieved his dream, but then simply chose to sit back and do nothing. McGregor was later stripped of the title due to inactivity, but would fight for his old belt upon his return to the octagon 2 years later. It wouldn't turn out well for the Irishman, as he was pummeled into oblivion by Khabib, and it seems as though his days at lightweight are firmly in rear view these days. I mean, at this point, no one even knows if we'll see him inside a UFC octagon ever again. What do you guys think? Coming in at 8, we have Boss Rutten. Stay tuned. Rutten really came into his own in the second half of his career and was undefeated for the last 11 years he competed. In the penultimate fight of his career, he challenged the late Kevin Randleman for the vacant heavyweight title. In a fight most agreed Rutten lost. Somehow, El Guapo was awarded the win after taking a beating from Randleman for most of the 21-minute fight, to the disdain of most in attendance. Rutten could have shut his haters up if he had gone a long run of defending his title, but it didn't play out like that. He would be forced to vacate the title shortly after due to inactivity, thanks to an injury. And in a fine example of the universe correcting itself, Randleman would win the title he had been cheated out of shortly after. Do you remember Rutten's reign? At number 7, we're talking about Frank Mir's heavyweight reign. All the way back in June 2004, Tim Sylvia was set to defend his title against Andrei Arlovski. However, the Belarusian suffered an injury shortly before the fight, and the young, hungry Mir stepped in at short notice. The fight produced one of the most iconic arm bars in UFC history, and Sylvia refused to tap, and Mir broke his arm at the elbow joint. However, it would be the last time Mir would be seen in the UFC octagon for 20 months, as he was involved in a nasty motorcycle accident shortly after, snapping his femur in the process. Of course, this resulted in a lengthy time on the treatment table, and Mir was subsequently forced to vacate the title. He would win the interim title in December 2008, but would never again hold the undisputed crown, despite another 2 attempts. Conor McGregor's featherweight reign is in at 6. Stick around. Conor spent the early part of his UFC career announcing after every fight that he was coming for Jose Aldo's featherweight crown, but after finally winning it in December 2015, as he knocked the great Brazilian out in 13 seconds flat, he would never again be seen at 145 pounds. Just like he would do a year later with the lightweight title, McGregor would somewhat strangely never actually defend the belt he had put so much into winning. He embarked on a 2-fight beef with Nate Diaz before fighting Eddie Alvarez for the lightweight title, which basically just served to hold up the featherweight division. His antics after winning the featherweight title mean his reign is safely on today's list of worst ever UFC title reigns. What do you guys think? At 5, it's GSP. No, not his first run as welterweight champion. That time he came back to prove how hard he was and to take Bisping's middleweight title, then right off into the sunset. Of course, George is a bona fide legend, and many people rightly see him as one of the greatest to ever do it. But coming back just to take a title, simply because you can, and then vacating the said title only caused chaos in the middleweight division. Robert Whittaker would be promoted to full champion shortly after GSP beat Bisping, as George made it clear he was one and done in his return to the octagon. We wonder how Bisping feels being beaten by George, who then gives his belt up. What did you guys make of George's middleweight debut? Give us your thoughts below. We have Juliana Pena at 4. Stay tuned. Juliana caused one of the biggest upsets in UFC history last year, 2021, as she submitted arguably the greatest female fighter of all time, Amanda Nunes. Pena put on the performance of her career as she locked in a rear naked choke on the bantamweight champion, and an instant rematch was quickly ordered ordered due to what Nunes had previously done in the promotion. 7 months later, the pair would meet again at UFC 277, with Amanda easily winning her belt back. Pena barely put up a fight, and Nunes, who seemingly could have caused a stoppage much earlier than the 5th, eventually stopped Juliana from wrestling her belt back from her. While she should obviously be credited for winning the title of one of the best, she'll surely look back on her performance in the rematch with disappointment. Josh Barnett is joining us at 3. Stick around. When Barnett dethroned Randy Couture back in 2002, it wasn't a stretch when people were suggesting a new dawn in the heavyweight division was upon us. However, Barnett would fail a drug test shortly after the fight and was immediately stripped of his title. Instead of serving his ban and asking the UFC fans and management for forgiveness, he decided to simply go to Japan and forge ahead with his combat career out there. He wouldn't be seen in the UFC again for another 11 years, but by that point, he was deep into his 30s. What did you make of Barnett's short-lived reign? At 2, we're talking Vitor Belfort. Given the fact that Vitor has been plagued by accusations of steroid abuse throughout his career, it's easy to forget his very brief reign as light heavyweight champion back in 2004. He came up against Randy Couture at UFC 46 and would go on to win the title after the stitching on his glove basically ripped Randy's eyelid apart. It was obvious the champ couldn't continue, but the fight should have been ruled a no contest. Instead, Vitor was awarded the TKO win, but Randy would win his belt back just a few months later as he pummeled the Brazilian in the rematch. Nobody doubts his skills in the octagon, but Belfort's PED abuse and the way in which he won the title would make him one of the most unpopular champions of all time, and his short-lived reign as champ would be pretty well received by fans of the sport. What did you guys make of Vitor Belfort's short stint as king of the UFC's light heavyweight division? And finally, at 1, we're talking Germaine de Randamie. The Dutch kickboxing legend won the women's bantamweight title at the expense of Holly Holm back in 2017, but would later be stripped of the crown. Her whole reign from start to finish was steeped in controversy, as, first and foremost, she wasn't even the #1 contender. The division was basically created for Cyborg, but when the Brazilian decided she wouldn't be ready in time for the inaugural title fight, de Randamie and Holm were selected to fight. De Randamie appeared to have lost most of the big exchanges and was guilty of multiple fouls throughout the fight, but was awarded the win anyway. She would later refuse to fight Cyborg, given the Brazilian's dodgy history with PED, and was promptly stripped. Given the fact that she wasn't really a contender to start with and probably lost the fight, as well as refusing to defend, it means that Germaine de Randamie's reign as women's bantamweight champion is probably the worst in UFC history. What do you guys think? As always, thanks for dropping by today, and remember to tune in again next time for some more fun and games. And why not do us a solid by liking and sharing today's video, while also subscribing to our channel. Bye guys!